have been collecting accounts from everyday people, asking them to remember how they learned to read and write, and how they use reading and writing as part of ordinary work and life. But what I really seek in these inquiries is how the memory of literacy's past, how the history of mass literacy, haunts the scenes of contemporary encounters with reading and writing. Literacy's memory is both custodian and catalyst of the changes that are swirling around reading and writing today. The detailed accounts that I collect, drenched as they are in time and place and image, offer tangible, memorable traces of this past. But I collect these testimonies with the hope that what I capture will improve our collective memory when it comes to literacy, as we try to interpret what is happening not only in our classrooms, but in the wider society. As we consider that what might seem most new today in terms of changes in our literacy can be driven in part by rearrangements of a persistent past, and as we try to be sensitive to how the past erupts in difficult and challenging ways in the everyday experiences of everyday literates. As a demonstration, we can continue with the literacy account of librarian Henry Leonard. Leonard was born in 1950, in the midst of print culture. He was raised by working-class parents eager for him to be a good student. Leonard said he vowed by the age of 6 that he would read every book in the town library, and said, "I got a lot of praise for reading books from my mother and the library staff." As a young adult, he worked as a custodian of books, first as a bookseller after college, and eventually as a library archivist. Over the last dozen years, however, he has been increasingly turning to writing to manage his work, as public funding for his library has tightened and computers have altered the ways people seek information. Leonard uses writing now not merely to mediate relations between collections and distant readers, but to generate and condition the readership itself. He uses writing to drum up business and to gather support. "I write all day," he explained, "and a lot of the writing I do brings in money, in the forms of grants, press releases, a blog, which he calls delicately an information delivery mechanism," still the librarian, I guess, "and family history materials that the library sells to amateur genealogists." These days, it is writing that garners praise from the library staff, as they turn their attention to newfangled rhetorical problems, such as figuring out the right textual formats to use to ensure that the Google search engine will detect their collections. Reading has been for being good in worship, in citizenship, in school, in work. Being good as in being well socialized, well informed, well behaved, well cultured, well parented, well positioned, well deserving, well trusted, well educated. In fact, any kind of well-being one can think of has been associated at one time or another with reading. We see this legacy in the relationship of Leonard to his mother and the librarians, figures with the traditional responsibility of nurturing the young by teaching the value of reading and its connections to being good. These values reach back into the earliest sponsoring institutions of a reading literacy, notably the church and the common school. This tradition was heavily associated with Protestant settlements in New England and was still well intact when Leonard was growing up in a Protestant settlement in New England in the 1950s and 1960s. Further, the institution of the free public library enshrined the value of reading and its relationship to the rights and duties of citizens to be responsibly informed participants in a democratic government. In the arrangements of a reading literacy, books have value because their goodness can rub off on readers. And it is this moral value that created the economy Leonard entered after college as a purveyor of books, first as a bookseller and eventually a librarian himself. He was able to turn literacy's moral value into making a living. As teachers of language and literacy, we tend to think of reading and writing as mutually supportive processes. They both draw on similar underlying cognitive and linguistic skills, and both rely on similar social, pragmatic, and rhetorical resources. Reading almost always shows up in the company of writing, in school, intensively so in academic assignments at the college level. And obviously there can be no reading without writing and no writing without reading. And despite the shaky research, there remains widespread belief that to write well, one must read well, that writers learn to write largely through reading. So because, as a group, we have been particularly invested in the similarities between reading and writing, we have spent less time thinking about how reading and writing can be in competition with each other, how they can be antagonistic to one another, how the uses and practices that grow up around the one might challenge and change the other. The fact that so many of us now are writing to other people who write is one of the most profound characteristics of the new mass literacy. Mass writing has always been for work, for production, for output, earning, profit, publicity, practicality, record keeping, buying, selling, and increasingly, writing itself is the product. Writing is less for good than it is a good. Reading might make you more productive, but writing is more productive. It is for itself, and its value is for itself. In fact, it is this commercial or transactional value of writing, its materiality, its amenability to work, wage, and market, that makes writing unique among the so-called language arts. Historically, this interlacing of writing literacy with commercial enterprise and wealth production means that workplaces and other commercial locations may well be the place where the most teaching and learning of writing has occurred in our history, despite our efforts as writing teachers. We can't keep up. And where the most subsidy for writing has occurred across time. Major subsidies for mass writing have come not mainly from church and state, but from employers, public and especially private. First in the trading and commercial economies of the new republic, escalating with industrialism, the growth of bureaucracies, the centrality of written communication in managing and coordinating large systems, and intensifying especially over the last 50 years as knowledge work has taken over the U.S. economy, making writing, as I said earlier, a chief means of production and a chief output of production.